Good morning. Tomorrow we are going to see hundreds of Canadian workers coming to Parliament Hill to talk to decision makers about the issues that matter to most of them at this moment in time. Workers across the country are struggling with affordability, they're worried about their future, and they're worried about whether or not they can afford to pay the rent and or to renew their mortgage. We have a number of priorities that we will be speaking to MPs and senators about over the next day and a half. Those primarily are going to be focused on sustainable jobs, on anti-scab legislation, and on pharmacare. And I'm going to ask Siobhán, Vipond, our Executive VP at the CLC, to speak to us about pharmacare.
Thank you, and good morning. We are waiting for pharmacare to be delivered on. We have, had high expectations last week for the fall economic statement to be putting money behind this commitment. This government has had time and has an opportunity to deliver on this. This is an important program that Canadians are waiting for. This will help all folks. This will help those who already have partial coverage. It'll help those who don't. It'll help our systems. And so it is time now. And so that is why this is such a big priority for us, because we feel the clock is ticking and that we need to see a delivery of a good pharmacare, universal pharmacare system.
Thank you, Siobhán. The other piece that we've been very diligently working on, and that is very much focused in the minds of workers right now, is the issue of Bill C-58, anti-scab legislation. We were so pleased to see that the NDP and the Liberals put this particular bill forward. This is something that workers have fought for decades to achieve. This is not something that's a foreign thought process. It already exists in Quebec and in British Columbia. We think that anti-scab and getting this done is a high time and it's a high priority for workers. We need anti-scab legislation to be able to balance the bargaining tables so that when workers get to the bargaining table, they can be assured that their employer is also there to bargain in good faith and to get the deal done, not to see whether or not they can employ scab labor to weaken the bargaining table process. So making sure that this legislation passes is a very high priority for us. Workers are very focused on this issue, and we're quite frankly dismayed that the CPC has not yet come out to say whether or not they're supporting this legislation. We know the Bloc is absolutely on board, and we appreciate that. They, of course, have this legislation in Quebec and have experience with it, but to not know where Pierre Poilievre stands on this is frustrating at this moment in time. We have not had a clear answer. It is high time that this legislation gets passed. It will impact 1 million federally regulated workers across Canada, and those workers are waiting for an answer on what when this legislation is going to come into effect. We are also very focused on the issue, of course, of sustainable jobs and making sure that Bill C-50 gets passed. We are very frustrated by the amount of time that it's taking to get through the committee stage of the process. We know that workers are very worried about what the future holds for them and for their communities. Will they be able to stay in the community that they have been raised in and that they're raising their families in? They're worried about what the transition to net zero looks like. They're worried about whether or not we're missing out on opportunities for investments in their home communities to build the jobs of tomorrow that we actually need. Right now, these things are up in the air. We can't even get to a framework while the Tories are holding up this legislation, and that is really shameful. Workers need action now. We needed it yesterday, and we need to make sure that we get this legislation passed so that all parties, labor, business, and various different levels of government can actually sit down at a table to work on these particular pieces. To not pass this legislation is to basically tell workers to take a back seat, and that's not good enough. We need to get moving on this particular piece. So as we are waiting for these things to happen, we are going to have a very robust lobby day tomorrow. We're looking forward to speaking with decision makers. People are excited to be able to come to Parliament Hill and to speak with their MPs and to explain the issues from their viewpoints. We have many different union members from all across the sectors and all across the country that will be coming out to speak on these particular issues, as well as many other. Affordability remains a very high priority for us. As Siobhán mentioned, pharmacare, very important to us. Changes to employment insurance, very important to us, as well making sure that the dental plan continues to move forward. Critically important when we know so many Canadians are struggling to make ends meet right now. Thank you.
And for people joining us on Zoom, you may use the raise hand function now. Pour eux qui nous joignent sur le Zoom, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction lever la main pour poser une question. And we have a question from Davis Legree. Davis, please go ahead.
Great, thanks very much. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Okay. What do you make of, you said it's frustrating, but what do you make of Pierre Poilievre staying mum on how his party will vote on the anti-scab bill? You know, the bill already has NDP and bloc support, so it should pass with it. Why does how the Conservatives vote matter to you at all?
It's incredibly frustrating because Pierre Poilievre purports to speak for workers, and yet at the same time, this is a bill that clearly supports workers and supports workers at bargaining tables. And to stay mum on this, or to say nothing on this, and to not identify what position they will be taking is, quite frankly, not a very courageous way to deal with this particular issue. Workers want answers.
And just as a follow-up, and I can't see if there's no one in the room right now. I do have a third question as well that maybe we can get to. Just like I said, kind of barring any surprises, this bill should pass kind of swiftly, you would think. I guess I'm really wondering why you're holding this press conference today, given that that the anti-scab law kind of has the support it already needs to become legislation. Well,
we're holding this press conference for a number of reasons. We have three priorities, as I noted when we started the press conference right off the hop. Really, it's to make sure that folks know there will be hundreds of workers on Parliament Hill tomorrow to talk about their issues with their elected MPs. And, you know, anti-scab is one of those priorities. There are many more. We want to make sure anti-scab gets passed quickly. We want to make sure that we can address some of the shortcomings that we see within that bill, and one of those shortcomings is the amount of time for implementation. 18 months is far too long. We want to make sure that these things happen in a much quicker succession, and so that is very, very much a priority for us.
Davis, you can go for your third question, and then we'll go into the room.
Sounds good. Okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, just wondering about that big lobbying day tomorrow. As you might be able to guess, the story I'm writing is about the anti-scab bill. I'm just wondering if you're speaking, or anyone you know is speaking with government officials and about the anti-scab stuff, and if so, who?
There will be a number of us speaking about the anti-scab stuff. We can get you the information in terms of who's speaking to who specifically, if you would like that, after this meeting.
Thank you so much, and thanks for taking the three questions. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm Natasha Belowski, Canada's National Observer. I'm sorry if this has been asked already since I'm late, but regarding Bill C-50, you know, there's some concerns from some members of committee that, you know, that are not, that want to see the order done differently about the lack of, you know, upskilling and reskilling programs in Bill C-50. I just want to hear from you what your concerns are, if any, about C-50 and why you want to see it passed.
My concerns about Bill C-50 is that it's sitting there being discussed at committee or being held up at committee when no actual conversation seems to be taking place about this. I was at a committee hearing about a month ago. The amount of time that's wasted on procedural issues rather than talking about the meat of that particular bill is really frustrating. Workers are fearful about their future, and we're holding this up because we're playing politics with a bill that needs to be passed so that we can get to the discussions about what changes might need to be made to that bill and how workers are going to be at the table to actually drive those conversations. And so our frustration right now is with the lack of action on that particular bill, and that we really need to see this passed.
And as a follow-up, have you had any conversations with MPs from various parties about getting that discussion moving?
We have, and we continue to have those, and we will continue to have those tomorrow, and hopefully we will see some movement in the not-too-distant future. Yeah.
And I'll ask again on Zoom, if you do have a question, please raise your hand now. You may ask another question if you'd like. Questions online? Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.